The Eryndor system stretched before Angela Yearney like a jewel-strewn void, its moons circling the dying gas giant Zephyros with silent, inexorable grace. From the cockpit of her starship Horizon's Edge, she watched the swirling clouds of violet and gold wrap around the planet's upper atmosphere. Every shimmer of energy hinted at the anomalies she had come to study and perhaps to survive. Angela's hands danced over the controls, adjusting trajectory and stabilizing energy readings. Her dark hair, cropped for practicality, brushed against her collar, and her green eyes flicked constantly between the navigation interface and the approaching moons. Eryndor was beautiful but dangerous. Its moons were far from fully mapped, and its anomalies had already destroyed entire research teams. Lieutenant Merrick, her loyal but anxious co-pilot, spoke over the comlink. "Angela, sensors are picking up more fluctuations near Tethys Prime than predicted. Energy spikes. Irregular. Almost alive." Angela's jaw tightened. "I've seen enough patterns to know when something isn't right. Prepare for orbital scan. I don't want any surprises." The ship shuddered as it passed through the first wave of ionized turbulence. The display screens flickered, casting intermittent light over Angela's sharp features. She exhaled slowly, steadying her pulse. "The anomalies aren't just environmental, Merrick. Something or someone is manipulating them." The thought of Nova Corp's influence made her stomach knot. Natasha Vera's name alone carried weight across the system. Ruthless, brilliant, and relentless. Angela had come to Eryndor not just for research, but because she had a personal score to settle. Nova Corp's greed and secrecy had cost lives, and if Natasha had anything to do with these disturbances, Angela would uncover it. Descending toward Tethys Prime, the surface of the moon glimmered with eerie crystalline formations. They pulsed, faintly resonating with energy readings from the ship. Angela's heart pounded. She had seen similar structures in the archives of destroyed expeditions, alien ruins whose purpose had been obscured by centuries of neglect and speculation. Merrick's voice trembled slightly. "Commander, are you sure about this? The last team that approached these formations. They never returned." Angela's eyes narrowed. "That's exactly why we need to know what's here. Fear doesn't solve anomalies. Knowledge does." She adjusted the descent controls, bringing the Horizon's Edge to a smooth hover above a ridge of pulsating crystal. As they prepared the landing pod, a faint shimmer rippled across the moon's surface. Angela paused, sensing a strange familiarity. In the energy, it wasn't just alien, it felt almost sentient. Merrick noticed her hesitation. "You feel that too, don't you?" Angela's lips pressed into a thin line. "Yes, something's watching us, but I can't tell if it's hostile or waiting." The landing pod touched the crystal-laden surface with barely a tremor. Angela's boots pressed into the moon's rocky crust, and the hum of energy thrummed beneath her feet. She scanned the surrounding formations with her portable analyzer. Readings spiked unexpectedly, creating intricate patterns on the device's display. Angela frowned. These weren't random. They were designed, messages, perhaps, or warnings from an intelligence far older than humanity. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the edge of the ridge, a woman in a sleek, dark suit, movement precise and confident. Angela's pulse accelerated. Natasha Vera had arrived without warning, without contact, and clearly prepared. "Yearney," Natasha's voice was calm, almost pleasant, but every syllable carried an undercurrent of challenge. "You always did have a taste for danger." Angela squared her shoulders, her green eyes locking onto Natasha's. "And you always have a taste for control." "What are you doing here, Vera?" Natasha smiled faintly, the expression both alluring and threatening. "Observing, guiding, perhaps testing. Eryndor has secrets even you can't imagine, and I intend to make sure I'm the one who decides their fate." Angela's heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the electric thrill of confrontation. This was not only a battle of wits, but a clash of wills that would shape the destiny of the moons. and of herself. The crystalline formations around them pulsed brighter, casting fractured light over their faces. In that moment, Angela knew the arrival on Tethys Prime was only the beginning. Secrets, danger, and desire would converge here, and nothing, neither loyalty nor love nor ambition, would remain untested. The moon's energy thrummed underfoot, almost as if acknowledging the two women standing on its surface. And Angela Yearney realized with a shiver she had just stepped into a game whose stakes were far higher than any she had imagined, and the first move had already been made. The airlock hissed shut behind Angela, sealing her inside the dimly lit corridor of Tethys Prime's research outpost. The interior, designed for human habitation, felt incongruously fragile compared to the moon's alien surface. Outside, the crystalline formations glimmered, their pulses synchronized with subtle energy readings that seemed almost alive. Angela adjusted her portable analyzer, scanning the ridge where she had seen Natasha Vera moments ago. The readings fluctuated wildly, energy streams crisscrossing the moon's magnetic field in patterns that resembled neural pathways. "It's communicating," she murmured, "or at least responding." Lieutenant Merrick hovered beside her. Unease etched across his face. "Responding to what, Angela? Us, or something else?" Angela's green eyes narrowed as she crouched to inspect a shard of crystalline material. Light refracted inside it like liquid fire. "Not us, not yet. It's reacting to intent, decisions, maybe consciousness. It's alive in a way we can barely comprehend." Her words barely faded when the comm link crackled. Natasha's voice, calm yet unmistakably sharp, pierced the corridor. "I see you've arrived, Yearney. Don't waste time probing what you barely understand." Angela's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "I understand enough to know you're hiding something, Vera. I intend to find out what." Silence lingered for a heartbeat. Then Natasha replied with a faint chuckle. "Curiosity is admirable. Dangerous, but admirable. Just remember, you may uncover truths that will change everything, and some truths cannot be unlearned." Angela's heart skipped. Natasha always had a way of making simple words carry weight, beyond comprehension. She glanced at Merrick, whose lips pressed together tightly. "She's playing with us," he muttered. Angela didn't answer. She was already moving toward the lab section, following the analyzer's erratic pulses. Each step seemed to resonate with the energy beneath her boots. The crystalline shards on the ridge emitted low-frequency vibrations that felt almost musical, weaving a subtle melody of tension and possibility. The lab was a jumble of half-finished experiments and flickering monitors. Angela scanned data logs left by previous research teams. Energy anomalies spiked around the ruins, often unpredictably, sometimes violently. Reports mentioned hallucinations, temporal distortions, and occasionally complete disappearance. One file caught her attention, a fragmentary audio recording in which a researcher whispered, "It sees more than we do. It knows us." Angela shivered. The words echoed what she had sensed on the ridge, an intelligence beyond her understanding, aware, perhaps even sentient. "Merrick, prepare the mapping drones. We need to see the full structure, interior and exterior. I need answers." As the drones deployed, their mechanical wings slicing through the thin atmosphere, the crystals responded, glowing brighter in rapid pulses. Angela watched the feed on her tablet as one drone approached a fissure in the largest formation. Energy surged along its edges, wrapping the drone in glowing arcs. The screen flickered, showing distorted visuals, impossible geometries, and fleeting ghostly figures that disappeared when she blinked. "It's alive," Angela whispered, voice barely audible. "And it's aware of us." A sudden vibration ran through the outpost. The entire facility shuddered as though acknowledging Angela's presence, or warning her. She instinctively grabbed the console for balance as Merrick yelled, "Energy spike. We're outside safe parameters." Angela's mind raced. If the ruin was sentient, its awareness could be deliberate or reactive, Calm the drones. Recalibrate. Sensors to interface frequency Omega-4. We need to communicate, or at least understand its pattern. As she worked, a shadow moved across the far window. Natasha stood there, silhouetted against the glowing crystals, her expression unreadable. "Careful, Angela," Natasha said softly, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the lab's hum. "You might find more than you bargained for." Angela's heart pounded, not only from Natasha's presence, but from the strange exhilaration of discovery. She realized that this confrontation was no longer only about corporate rivalry. It was entwined with the ruins, the anomalies, and something deeper. Within herself, a pulse surged through the crystals, resonating in perfect synchronicity with her own heartbeat. Angela's vision blurred, not from fear, but from recognition. The ruins were responding, not to technology, not to tools, but to will and intent. And Natasha had known this all along. Angela swallowed hard. The stakes had just escalated. Tethys Prime was no longer a moon to be surveyed. It was a living puzzle, testing her judgment, her courage, and the fragile boundaries between power, desire, and survival. The first night on Tethys Prime ended with a single realization: the echoes of the ruins would not let her leave unchanged, and Natasha Vera's shadow would not relinquish its hold so easily. Angela Yurney tightened the harness of her exosuit as she prepared to descend into the fissure beneath the largest crystalline formation on Tethys Prime. The pulsating shards towered above her like alien spires, casting fractured light across the rocky landscape. Every pulse of energy resonated in her chest, a rhythmic thrum that seemed to match her own heartbeat. "Are you sure about this, Commander?" Marek asked, his voice echoing through the exosuit's calm. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the stabilizers on the drone hovering above them. Last reconnaissance barely survived the outer rim. "Now you want to go inside?" Angela didn't answer immediately. Her green eyes scanned the fissure's entrance, where shadows deepened unnaturally. She had felt the ruin's presence before, but now it was closer, tangible, almost predatory in its awareness. "We go inside because no one else will, and because if we don't understand it, Natasha Vera will exploit it, and countless lives will be lost." A sudden flicker of violet light streaked across the crystals, reflecting on Angela's visor. She felt it, a subtle tug at the edges of her mind, a whisper she couldn't quite hear. "Do you feel that?" she murmured. Marek nodded grimly, sweat beading on his forehead. The fissure seemed to react to their intentions, shifting subtly, like a living organism, anticipating their every move. Descending into the cavern, Angela activated the portable energy scanner. The readings were chaotic, fluctuating spikes that defied known physical laws. Crystalline walls refracted light into impossible geometries, twisting and bending in ways that made Marek stumble in awe. "It's not just alien," he whispered. "It's conscious." Angela knelt beside a shard embedded with faint glyphs. The symbols glowed faintly, responsive to her proximity. She traced a finger over the crystalline surface. Images flashed before her eyes, fractured visions of alien landscapes, civilizations rising and falling, energy currents intertwining like threads of thought. She blinked rapidly. It's a memory," she breathed. "The ruin is storing history, maybe even consciousness." Marek's voice trembled. "And Natasha wants to control it." Angela nodded, feeling the weight of that realization. Natasha Vera had anticipated this. Her presence earlier had not been random. It was calculated, precise. Every movement, every glance had been a test. A low hum grew louder as they ventured. Deeper, the crystal walls vibrating in resonance with their steps. Angela's eyes widened as she noticed a series of fissures forming a spiral leading downward. It was almost architectural, deliberate. Energy arcs danced along the edges of the walls, responding to her exosuit's life sign readings. "Commander," Marek said, voice strained, "the drones are malfunctioning. They keep spinning in patterns like they're following something." Angela exhaled sharply. They're following the energy currents. Focus on the pattern, Merrick, not the chaos. That's how we map it. As they descended, a sudden surge of light burst from the spiral's center. Angela instinctively raised her visor, shielding her eyes. When the glare subsided, she saw a figure at the bottom, a tall, commanding woman in black armor, her presence emanating authority and danger. Natasha Vera. "You're persistent, Yurney," Natasha said, her tone cool, almost amused. "I expected hesitation. I expected fear. Yet here you are." Angela straightened, her pulse racing. "And you're predictable, Vera. Always showing up where you think you can control the situation. But not this time." Natasha's lips curved into a faint smile. "Control? No, Angela. I'm merely guiding the outcome. This ruin, it's alive, and it will respond to whoever understands its language." Angela stepped closer to the energy spiral, feeling it hum beneath her boots. "I intend to understand it, not manipulate it, not weaponize it, just understand." Natasha's expression darkened, her eyes narrowing. Naive. In Eryndor, understanding is never enough. Survival requires dominance. A pulse of energy surged through the spiral, knocking Angela and Marek to their knees. The light from the crystal walls danced across Natasha's face, giving her an almost ethereal glow. Angela realized that the ruin was reacting not just to physical presence, but to intent, emotion, and willpower. Every subtle choice sent ripples through the energy. Angela's mind raced. This was more than a test of courage. It was a challenge of perception, trust, and moral clarity. Natasha would exploit weakness. The ruin would exploit misunderstanding, and the wrong decision could doom them all. As she rose, brushing dust from her exosuit, Angela felt a strange clarity. The ruin's memory and consciousness were vast, but it wasn't hostile. It was waiting, testing, resonating. And Angela knew she had the first real chance to communicate, to align herself with the unknown rather than fight it blindly. Natasha's gaze met hers, intense and unwavering. "Let's see," she said softly, almost a whisper, "if you're capable of seeing the truth before it consumes you." Angela squared her shoulders. She didn't flinch. "I'll survive. And I'll uncover it first." The crystalline spiral thrummed with life beneath her boots, echoing her resolve. Tethys Prime was no longer a moon to be surveyed. It was a living labyrinth, a test of will and a mirror of ambition, and Angela Yurney intended to master it. The shuttle's engines died into a low hum as Peter drifted through the docking corridor, boots scraping the metallic floor with each deliberate step. Beyond the reinforced viewport stretched the skeletal remains of Outpost Helion 3, a once thriving relay hub now hovering in silence like a mausoleum over the fractured edge of Earth's orbit. The station had been abandoned after the collapse, yet the last recorded transmission, the fragmentary Earth signal, had been traced back here. The docking hatch sealed shut behind him with a hollow clang echoing down the corridor. Dust floated in thin patches disturbed by his breath as his visor filters hissed faintly. Every corner was coated in neglect, peeling hazard stripes, flickering wall lamps, and long stretches of silence broken only by the creaks of metal contracting against the void. Peter's eyes scanned the interior. Graffiti lingered across the walls, messages scrawled by desperate hands before the station was deserted. "Don't answer the call. They are listening. Trust no one." The words unsettled him. His instincts told him to retreat, but the faint pulse of the Earth signal resonated deeper within the array. He couldn't leave, not now. He powered up his wrist scanner, watching its interface flicker with static before it locked onto a faint beacon ahead. As he advanced deeper, his path carried him through abandoned mess halls, where overturned trays still floated, through crew quarters where bunks were left unmade, and into a long, spiraling maintenance shaft that plunged toward the relay core, halfway. Down the shaft, Peter's helmet comms crackled. A voice, barely audible, warped by interference, whispered, "Peter." His breath froze in his chest. He whipped around, but the shaft was empty, only the faint red glow of emergency strips, guiding him downward. He tapped the comms, adjusting frequencies, but no one responded. He had not given his name to anyone here. At the base of the shaft, he reached the relay chamber. It was massive, cathedral-like, filled with towering antenna spires and fractured glass panels that revealed the endless stars beyond. At the center floated the array's main console, still alive, glowing faintly with the dying pulse of the signal. Approaching it, Peter saw the display flicker with bursts of code, ancient Earth encryption, something he hadn't seen in decades. He placed his glove against the console. The system responded instantly, screens rippling with light as though recognizing him. Lines of text scrolled across. "Last Earth transmission, do not let them hear." And then a sound filled the E. Chamber, not static, not machine noise, but a voice, human, desperate, echoing across time. "Peter, if you hear this, they've already found us." Peter staggered back. His heart pounded against his ribs. Whoever sent this transmission, whoever had spoken his name, was still alive when it was recorded. The console buzzed again. The chamber's lights dimmed. Something else was listening. Somewhere within the dead station, machinery stirred, ancient servos grinding, metal footsteps echoing through the hollow corridors. Peter tightened his grip on his weapon, eyes narrowing into the dark. The silence of the void was broken. The outpost was no longer abandoned. Above the colonists' fragile outpost, the alien sky split open in a jagged flash of violet lightning that seemed too deliberate to be natural. It danced across the horizon, outlining the skeletal ridges of the mountains that loomed in the distance. A low vibration followed, not thunder, but something deeper, stranger, as though the planet itself was groaning awake. Clint stood on the central ridge outside the settlement, his boots sinking into the damp, red soil. He had learned, in his short time here, to read the planet's moods. The way the clouds coiled unnaturally, the subtle shifts in the magnetic field that his suit sensors detected, the way birds would vanish all at once as if retreating from an unseen predator. This storm felt different. Not a weather event, a signal. "Clint, do you read me?" crackled the comm link in his ear. It was Mara, the outpost's chief engineer. Her voice was strained, fighting static interference. "We're picking up fluctuations. Power grid's unstable. You need to get back inside." Clint didn't move. His gaze stayed fixed on the horizon, where the storm's epicenter swirled into a spiraling vortex of purple light. In its depths, he thought he saw shapes moving, angular, mechanical silhouettes flickering between clouds. His pulse quickened. "Not weather," Clint muttered under his breath. "They're here." The first blast came a heartbeat later. A column of searing plasma tore down from the clouds, striking the far end of the valley with an earth-shattering roar. The ground convulsed, throwing Clint to one knee. Dust and debris erupted skyward, blotting out the horizon in a storm of ash. Inside the colony's perimeter, alarms wailed. The settlers scrambled like ants, dragging equipment into bunkers, securing children, shouting over the rising chaos. Mara's voice came again, sharper. "Now. Clint, get back now. Whatever that is, it's targeting the colony." But Clint's instincts, honed in wars back on Earth, told him running wasn't an option. He pressed his comm. "Mara, seal the east hangar and keep the power core offline. They're trying to draw us out." Another strike hammered the ground, closer this time, sending a shock wave that rattled Clint's teeth. He forced himself upright and sprinted toward the observation deck, lungs burning. From there he'd have a clear view of the valley and whatever was clawing its way out of the sky. When he reached the high ridge, the sight froze him in place. The storm's vortex widened like a wound splitting open. From within, massive structures began to emerge, black, jagged ships shaped like blades, descending with unnatural silence. Their surfaces shimmered with crimson veins of light, pulsing like living organisms. Clint had seen warships before, but nothing like these. They weren't simply machines, they felt predatory. The colonists had barely scratched the surface of this world. And yet, something already knew they were here. A whisper of movement to his left snapped Clint from his trance. He spun, weapon raised. Out of the haze emerged a figure cloaked in shadow, tall and humanoid but armored in a carapace that shifted like liquid metal. Its eyes glowed red, burning through the storm. It didn't move to attack. Instead, it stood still, studying him like a predator, deciding if its prey was worth the kill. The air between them vibrated, a resonance that wasn't sound but something. Deeper, crawling straight into Clint's mind. Images flashed in his vision, burning cities, collapsing ships, human screams swallowed by black fire. He staggered back, clutching his head, realizing the truth too late. This was no storm. It was an invasion, and they had been marked. The figure vanished in a blur of lightning, leaving Clint alone on the ridge as the alien ships descended. His comm burst alive with desperate voices, colonists calling his name, children crying, Mara shouting for guidance. Clint tightened his grip on his rifle. His hand shook, not from fear but from the weight of understanding. The settlers had come here to build a future. Now, survival was no longer about carving a home from the wilderness. It was about resisting extinction. He took one steadying breath, lifted his comm, and spoke the words that would define the days to come. Everyone, get underground. The war starts now. The cavern walls glowed faintly with veins of blue crystal, each pulse synchronized like the heartbeat of something vast and ancient. Angela's breath misted in the air as she descended deeper into the fracture caves, the air thick with mineral, dust, and the electric tang of raw energy. Behind her, Cale's footsteps echoed, steady and deliberate, but quieter than usual. His silence told her he was wary. In places like this, silence was the wiser choice. Above ground, Eryndor's moons looked shattered, 3 broken orbs dangling in the heavens, their fragments caught in eternal orbit. Down here, the truth of that ruin was more palpable. The very rock seemed to hum with the memory of destruction. Angela paused at a fork in the cavern and ran her gloved hand along the crystal. A faint resonance filled her ears, not sound, but thought, a whisper embedded in the stone. Words in no language she knew trickled into her mind, like voices from another age. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Cale adjusted the grip on his rifle and shook his head. "I hear nothing but my pulse." "Are you sure?" She cut him off with a gesture. "It's not sound. It's older." Her eyes burned with a strange familiarity, as though the cavern were addressing her directly. She pressed forward, compelled, and the crystals flared in response. By the time they reached the heart of the cavern, the air vibrated with raw force. A hollow chamber opened before them, vast and cathedral-like, the ceiling studded with crystal spires that hung like frozen lightning. In the center floated a sphere of fractured stone, suspended by streams of blue light. Angela felt her knees weaken. The core fragment. She had seen sketches in ancient scrolls, whispered about by the Ardent Order, but nothing had prepared her for the sight of it. The fragment pulsed like a wounded star, each flash revealing runes that danced across its jagged surface. It was not merely a relic, it was alive. Cale's voice was low, awed despite himself. This shouldn't exist." Angela stepped closer, the pull irresistible. But as she did, the cavern shifted. A deep rumble shuddered through the ground. Crystal spires cracked, their glow intensifying. And then came the sound, a chorus of overlapping whispers, urgent and chaotic, filling her head until she staggered. Chosen, marked. Beware the shadow that walks. Angela clutched her temples. The voices pressed images into her mind. Shattered moons raining fire, a woman's silhouette crowned with a black flame, and Natasha's face, her red eyes burning with fury. She gasped and stumbled back. Cale caught her arm. "Angela, what is it?" But before she could answer, The cavern roared with movement. From the shadows between the crystal pillars, figures emerged, tall, angular, with armor that seemed to bleed light. Their faces were hidden beneath smooth masks, but their weapons gleamed with the same blue fire as the core. Kyle raised his rifle instantly, but Angela put a hand on his arm. "Wait." One of the masked figures stepped forward, tilting its head as if studying her. Then it spoke, not aloud, but directly into her mind. "Bearer of the core's call. You awaken what should have remained forgotten." Angela's throat tightened. She wanted to demand answers, but the words in her mind were not her own when she replied. "I did not awaken it. It called to me." The figure's mask flared and the cavern trembled again. All around them, the crystals began to fracture, as though the core's awakening was unraveling the cave itself. Kyle cursed under his breath. "Angela, we need to leave. Now." But Angela's gaze was locked on the floating fragment, its pulse now perfectly matched with her heartbeat. The voices surged again, deafening, and she realized with icy certainty that there was no leaving. The core had chosen her, and whatever was bound beneath Eryndor's broken moons was beginning to stir. The chamber trembled as Angela and Cale faced the masked figures. Light from the core fragment rippled across the crystalline walls, casting fractured shadows that danced like living things. The masked guardians moved with unnatural grace, their weapons humming softly, synchronized with the core's pulsing energy. Angela's heartbeat thrummed in her chest, echoing the fragment's rhythm. Every instinct screamed caution, but curiosity, or perhaps destiny, propelled her forward. "We don't want to fight," she said aloud, though her voice barely rose above a whisper. One figure tilted its head, as if acknowledging her words. Then, in a voice inside her mind, deep and resonant, it spoke. "Peace is impossible without understanding. Why have you come, bearer of the core's call?" Angela steadied herself. I didn't come here to take it. I came to understand it, to protect it from those who would misuse its power." A long silence followed. The guardians moved in unison, circling her and Cale, their presence a mixture of menace and reverence. One of them raised a hand, and a thin blade of light extended, from the tip of its weapon pointing directly at Angela's chest. The crystal walls pulsed in response, and she felt an almost physical pressure pressing against her mind. Cale gripped her arm. "Angela, maybe we should—" "No," she interrupted, her voice firm. "We can't leave now. Not when we're this close." The lead guardian spoke again, its words shaping visions in her mind. She saw flashes of Eryndor's history, moons shattering in cataclysmic explosions, civilizations rising and falling, the core fragment being passed from one generation of guardians to the next. Angela realized that she wasn't just witnessing history, she was experiencing it. The core's memory was alive, and it was teaching her. "Your arrival was foretold," the guardian intoned. "The fragment chooses its bearer, those who— Follow will be tested. The shadow approaches." Angela's stomach tightened. The shadow. The very name conjured images of Natasha Vera and the chaos she had already sown on Eryndor. The visions intensified, Natasha's red eyes cutting through. A storm of black crystal, armies of mechanized constructs emerging from shattered moons, destruction trailing in her wake. Angela took a deep breath, grounding herself. "Then I accept the test," she said firmly. "I will bear the core. I will not let the shadow corrupt it." The guardians paused, the tension in the room thick enough to taste. Then, slowly, they lowered their weapons. One stepped forward closer to Angela and extended a hand, a gesture of acknowledgement, not attack. "Your courage is recognized," the figure said, "but the test has only begun. The shadow will challenge all you hold dear. The core's power is both shield and burden. Choose wisely." Angela nodded. A strange warmth radiated from the core, resonating with her heartbeat in perfect harmony. It was as if the fragment itself was acknowledging her resolve, linking with her in a silent pact. Kyle exhaled, a mix of relief and apprehension. That was intense. What now? Angela's eyes remained fixed on the floating fragment. We learn, we prepare. The shadow will come, and when it does, we'll be ready. The chamber fell silent, save for the soft hum of the core and the faint echoes of the Guardian's footsteps retreating into the shadows. Outside, Eryndor's shattered moons glimmered coldly against the void, reminding Angela that the trials ahead would be unlike anything she had faced before. She placed a hand on Cale's shoulder. We're not just exploring a ruin anymore. We're standing at the center of a war older than the stars themselves, and the first move is ours. Chapter 7 highlights, introduces the Core's guardians and their mystical connection to Angela. Deepens the stakes with the shadow Natasha. Threat looming. Angela accepts her role as bearer of the Core, showing courage and moral clarity. Foreshadows the coming conflict while expanding Eryndor's ancient history and lore. The Core fragment hovered before Angela, its fractured surface reflecting the pale glow of the cavern's crystalline walls. Each pulse of energy resonated within her chest, entwining with her heartbeat in a rhythm that was almost sentient. The air hummed, alive with potential and danger, as if the ruin itself had awakened in recognition of her resolve. Cale stayed close, watching her with a mix of awe and concern. "Angela, are you sure this is safe?" he asked, voice tight with unease. The exosuit's sensors blinked erratically, struggling to read the fragment's energy signature. "I've never seen anything like this. It's reacting to you." Angela reached out, letting her gloved fingers hover just above the surface. Sparks of blue light leaped from the core, dancing across her fingertips, yet not burning her. Instead, a warmth spread through her, as if the fragment was breathing life into her very veins. "I can feel it, Cale," she whispered. "It's communicating, not with words, but with intent." Suddenly the cavern shuddered. Crystals along the walls fractured, sending shards tumbling into the abyss below. A low, resonant roar filled the chamber, vibrating through the floor, through her bones, even through the very marrow of her mind. Angela staggered, clutching her head, and visions flashed in her mind. Fractured moons falling into Eryndor's oceans, entire civilizations crushed under black shadows, and Natasha, her eyes burning crimson, standing triumphant atop the ruins. Cale grabbed her arm. "Angela, focus! What's happening?" Angela blinked rapidly, forcing herself back to the present. "The shadow, it's aware," she said, her voice trembling. "It knows I'm bonded to the Core, and it's coming." The Core pulsed violently, and this time Angela felt a presence entering her consciousness. Not hostile, but probing, questioning, almost maternal. The fragment's energy wove around her thoughts, sifting through her memories, her fears, her courage. In return, she projected her will, her desire to protect, her determination to prevent the shadow from corrupting the power. A surge of light exploded from the Core, washing the chamber in brilliance. Angela gasped as she was lifted slightly off her feet, suspended by threads of energy that bound her to the fragment. She could see through the crystal walls, beyond. The cavern, glimpsing the fractured moons above and the blackening void that heralded Natasha's arrival. Cale's voice was distant now, almost drowned by the torrent of sensation. "Angela!" She focused on him, sending a mental anchor, and the connection broke just enough for her to land on her feet. The Core hovered at her side, pulsing calmly now, as if acknowledging her mastery over the initial bond. Angela exhaled slowly. "It's done, for now, but the shadow will test me. Soon." Kyle's grip on her shoulder tightened. "What can it do? The Core, I mean. You feel like you've merged with it. Is that even possible?" Angela looked at the fragment, its energy rippling in response. It's more than possible. It's necessary. The core adapts to its bearer. It strengthens our will, amplifies our perception. But if the shadow ever touches me while I'm linked, I could lose control. As if to underscore her words, the cavern trembled again. From the shadows at the far end, a black shimmer moved, subtle, almost imperceptible. But Angela's senses, now tuned to the core, detected the danger immediately. Natasha had arrived. "Kale," she said, voice sharp, eyes blazing, "we don't have time. Prepare yourself. She's here, and she knows exactly where we are." The masked guardians had vanished during her bonding with the core, leaving the chamber eerily silent. Only the pulse of the fragment and the distant rumble of the approaching shadow filled the space. Angela felt a flicker of fear, the kind that made blood ice, but she suppressed it, letting the bond with the core steady her nerves. Outside, Eryndor's moons shimmered, their fractured forms casting jagged light across the landscape. Angela could feel Natasha's presence, as if it were a shadow stretching across the planet itself. Every instinct screamed caution, every fiber of her being demanded action. And yet, Angela smiled faintly. For the first time, she was not merely running toward danger, she was armed with power that even Natasha could not easily comprehend. "Come," she said to Kale, "if the shadow wants war, let's show her what the core can do." The cavern pulsed once more, and with a surge of light, Angela stepped toward the fissure leading to the surface. Outside, the fractured moons loomed like silent sentinels. The coming battle would decide not just their fate, but the fate of Eryndor itself. Angela's boots crunched against the fractured stone of the cavern's exit as she and Kale emerged into the pale light of Eryndor's twin suns. The fractured moons hung low in the sky, jagged fragments reflecting against each other, casting long, spidery shadows across the barren landscape. The core fragment hovered at her side, its gentle pulse now steady, a beacon of light and hope amidst the encroaching darkness. Kale scanned the horizon, rifle ready. "I don't see anything, not yet," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. His instincts, honed by years in Earth's military, told him that stillness was never safe. Angela's eyes narrowed. She could feel it, a presence, immense and malevolent, pressing against the bond she had formed with the core. The energy thrummed in her chest, warning her that Natasha was near. Then a shadow moved. It wasn't a conventional shadow, it was a ripple, a distortion in the air that warped the light of the moons, like a living void crawling across the terrain. From it emerged Natasha, her armor black as obsidian, eyes burning crimson with calculated fury. Behind her, mechanized constructs skidded over the jagged ground, their claws tearing furrows into the stone. The shadow had arrived. Angela lifted the core fragment between them, letting its radiant energy flare outward. Waves of blue light erupted, throwing back the advancing constructs. But Natasha only smiled, a cruel, predatory curl of her lips. "You finally found it," Natasha's voice carried over the distance, sharp and taunting. "And you think you can control it?" Angela squared her shoulders. "I don't think, Natasha. I know. The core is mine to protect. And I won't let you corrupt it." With a sudden movement, Natasha struck. She moved faster than the eye could track, black energy lancing from her palms. Angela barely raised the core in time, deflecting the strike. Sparks of light danced across the landscape, illuminating the fractured moons with each collision. Kale fired at the constructs, each shot echoing through the canyon, but for every machine that fell, two more replaced it. The ground trembled beneath them as Natasha advanced, her aura bending the environment, warping the light and chilling the air around them. Angela realized she needed to act. The core pulsed against her chest, responding to her will. She lifted it higher, focusing on Natasha. Energy erupted from the fragment in a cascading wave of brilliance, slicing through the constructs and creating a barrier that forced Natasha back several paces. The shadow hissed, a sound like grinding metal, and scorched air. You cannot hope to contain me. I am inevitable. Angela felt the core's pulse intensify, syncing with her heartbeat. A plan formed in her mind, a risky, dangerous gambit that could either save them or destroy everything. She whispered to Kale, urgency in her tone. Circle left. Draw her toward the crystal ridge. The core can amplify its energy through the crystals. Kale nodded, moving quickly, covering her flank. Together they maneuvered through the fractured landscape, weaving between shards of fallen moons, leading Natasha and her army toward the ridge. The constructs followed blindly, their black forms cutting through the dust like predators. At the ridge, Angela focused every ounce of her energy. The core flared, resonating with the crystalline spires embedded in the stone. Light shot upward, forming a lattice of energy that arced across the ridge, entrapping the constructs and forcing Natasha to halt. The shadow seethed, fury radiating in waves of black lightning that slammed into the ridge, but could not break the crystalline barrier. Angela's gaze locked onto Natasha's. This ends now, she declared, her voice echoing across the fractured moons. You will not take this power. Natasha snarled, her figure rippling as she prepared another assault, more dangerous than the last. The battle was far from over, but Angela had proven something vital. She could wield the core, and she would fight to the last breath to protect it. The moons trembled overhead, their fractured edges casting jagged light upon the battlefield. The war for Eryndor had truly begun. The battlefield stretched beneath the fractured moons, a jagged expanse of rock and crystal that reflected the chaos unfolding. Angela stood at the center, the core fragment floating beside her, radiating waves of blue light that cut through the haze of dust and energy. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of the power coursing through her veins. Natasha had advanced, her black armor blending with the shadows of the fractured terrain. Around her, mechanized constructs surged forward, in relentless waves, their metallic limbs tearing through stone and crystal alike. The shadow's presence was suffocating, pressing on Angela's mind, forcing every instinct into overdrive. Kale crouched behind a crystalline outcropping, rifle at the ready. Angela, the constructs, they're adapting to the core. He shouted over the roar of energy, you'll need more than raw power to stop them. Angela's gaze snapped to the horizon, calculating, sensing, connecting. The core pulsed in reply, a rhythm almost alive, as though it understood her intentions. She raised it above her head, channeling every ounce of her will into its fractured surface. Beams of pure, radiant energy shot outward, creating a luminous barrier that disintegrated the closest constructs in a sizzling cascade of sparks and molten metal. But Natasha was unfazed. She stepped through the veil of light, her crimson eyes blazing. With a sweep of her hand, a surge of black energy lanced outward, striking the core's barrier. The collision of light and shadow sent shockwaves across the battlefield, hurling Angela backward and cracking the crystalline ridge beneath her feet. Angela gasped, steadying herself. The core flared violently, its surface shifting like liquid, responding to her escalating fear and determination. She realized that every surge of energy she projected was mirrored in the terrain, the fractured moons above, and even the dust particles swirling in the air. The planet itself seemed to resonate with the battle, amplifying the power of both, the bearer and the shadow. Kale shouted again, Angela, if you push it too far, it could... I have to, she interrupted, her voice cutting through the roar. We can't let her break through. Not here, not now. With a surge of determination, Angela leaped forward, the core's light wrapping around her like a living armor. Each step she took left trails of radiant energy etched into the fractured rock. She focused on Natasha, drawing her own energy from the fragment and from the rhythm of the planet itself. The two forces collided mid-air, light and shadow entwining. In a blinding display, for a moment the battlefield ceased to exist. Only the clash of their wills remained, radiating outward in waves that shook the very moons above. Angela felt her mind stretch, the core testing her endurance, probing her fears and pushing her to her limits. Through the cacophony of energy and chaos, a vision struck her, one of the shattered moons, raining debris down upon the land. The vision was a warning. If Natasha won this clash, the moons themselves could become weapons devastating everything. Below, Angela's pulse synchronized with the core. She pushed deeper, drawing light from the crystal ridges, focusing on creating a resonance that could disrupt Natasha's shadow energy. The constructs around them began to falter, their movements jerky, as though the very physics of the battlefield bent to Angela's command. Natasha's scream of frustration echoed across the moonscape. The shadow's armor cracked, black lightning searing through its surface. Angela pressed forward, extending her will, and the core's brilliance erupted in a concentrated beam that forced Natasha back, shattering the nearest constructs in a rain of molten fragments. Cale moved to Angela's side, panting. "You did it for now," he said, his eyes wide with both fear and awe. "But she's still out there, and she'll come back stronger." Angela's chest heaved, the core's energy still pulsing in tandem with her heartbeat. "I know," she replied, her voice steady despite exhaustion. "And next time, we won't just defend. We'll strike first. We have to." The fractured moons cast jagged reflections over the battlefield as the two forces withdrew temporarily, each aware that this confrontation was only the beginning. Angela's bond with the core had deepened, but the shadow's cunning and strength remained a looming threat. Above all, Angela understood one terrifying truth. The war for Eryndor was far from over, and the true scale of the Shadow's plan had yet to reveal itself. After the furious clash on the fractured ridge, silence settled over the moonscape, though it was a brittle peace. Crystalline shards from the battlefield glimmered faintly in the eerie light of the shattered moons, casting jagged reflections across the scarred terrain. Angela and Cale stood together, bruised and exhausted, yet unbroken. The core hovered between them, pulsing gently, a steady reminder of the bond they now shared. Cale exhaled slowly, scanning the horizon. "She's gone, for now, but I know better than to think this is over." Angela's eyes remained on the horizon, her mind already racing. She'll be back, and next time, she'll come with more than constructs. She'll come with strategy, with traps. We need to anticipate her moves. The bond with the core had deepened, leaving Angela with insights she hadn't yet fully understood. The fragment whispered subtle currents of possibility, showing flashes of probable futures, some promising, some disastrous. In one vision, Natasha's red eyes burned in triumph atop a mountain of blackened crystal. In another, Angela and Kyle stood victorious, their enemies scattered, the moons themselves stabilizing. "We need information," Angela said firmly. "We can't just wait for her to strike again. We need to know where she's hiding, what she plans, and what her limits are." Cale nodded. "Then we start with her networks. The Shadow doesn't move alone. She has agents, systems, spies embedded across Eryndor. If we trace them, we might find her main base, or at least gain a step ahead." The core pulsed in agreement, faint tendrils of light dancing along Angela's arm as if urging her forward. She closed her eyes briefly, reaching out with her mind, letting the fragment probe the energy currents around them. It revealed whispers of activity, hidden pathways beneath the shattered moons, abandoned tunnels that had once been corridors of the Ardent Order, faint traces of Natasha's energy signature still lingering like a shadow in the stones. Angela opened her eyes, determination burning within them. "There. We start there. If Natasha is rebuilding, she'll return to one of her old strongholds, and we will be ready." Kyle frowned. "Are you sure it's safe? We barely survived the last encounter, and now you want to go deeper into her domain?" Angela turned to him, her gaze steady. "Safe isn't part of the equation anymore. The core chose me. We have power now. But power alone won't win this war. Strategy, knowledge, and foresight will. As they prepared to descend into the tunnels, a flicker of movement caught Angela's eye. A masked figure emerged from the shadows of the ridge, its presence silent, almost ghost-like. Angela raised the core instinctively, ready to strike, but the figure halted, holding up a hand in a gesture of truce. "Bearer of the core," the figure spoke directly into her mind. Voice calm yet commanding. "You are not alone. The Guardians have watched your progress. The shadow grows stronger, but guidance is offered to those deemed worthy." Angela's pulse quickened. The Guardians' presence had been a mystery until now, and their involvement could tip the scales in their favor. What guidance? She asked internally, her thoughts resonating with the core's light. The shadow's strategy relies on fear and misdirection. She will attempt to divide you from your allies, to turn strength into hesitation. Trust in your bond with the core. Trust in each other. And above all, remember, light can fracture the darkness, but it must be wielded with precision. Kylie shifted uneasily beside her. Wielded with precision? Angela? That sounds ominous. Angela smiled faintly, though her eyes remained serious. It is, but it's exactly what we need. If we're going to confront Natasha again, we can't just react. We need a plan that anticipates every shadow, every trap. And now, with the Guardian's guidance, we might just have it. The masked figure stepped back into the shadows, fading as silently as it had appeared. Angela turned to Kyle, her expression resolute. "We move tonight. We gather information, trace her networks, and find her lair. Natasha won't expect us to strike preemptively." Kale nodded, a mix of tension and trust in his gaze. "Lead the way, Angela. We follow your command." The shattered moons above trembled faintly, as if acknowledging the coming storm. The war for Eryndor was far from over, and Angela knew that every choice, every step, could tilt the scales toward victory or doom. But for the first time, she felt ready. The tunnels beneath the fractured moons yawned before Angela and Kale like the gaping maw of some colossal beast. Jagged crystal walls reflected the faint light of the core fragment, casting fractured patterns across the rough stone floor. Every step echoed ominously, as if the ruins themselves were listening. Angela's senses were heightened. The core hummed softly, attuned to every movement, every ripple of energy within the lair. Kale moved beside her cautiously, rifle ready. "This place, it feels alive," he murmured, eyes darting to every shadow, "like it knows we're here." Angela nodded silently. The Guardian's guidance echoed in her mind. The shadow relies on fear and misdirection. Trust in the core and trust in each other. She felt the core's pulse intensify, resonating with the tension in the tunnels, a subtle warning of traps lying ahead. As they advanced deeper, the path narrowed. Crystal spires jutted from the floor and ceiling, forming natural corridors that twisted unpredictably. Angela felt a surge of power from the core, sensing Natasha's presence nearby, a coiled tension that vibrated through the very walls. Suddenly, the tunnel split into multiple paths, each more treacherous than the last. Shadows flickered unnaturally along the walls, forming distorted silhouettes that almost seemed to move independently. Angela placed her hand on the core, drawing its light into a focused sphere that hovered ahead, illuminating the most stable path. Kale glanced at her. "How do you even know which way to go?" Angela didn't answer verbally. Instead, she extended her mind toward the core, letting it probe the ambient energy. A subtle pull guided her feet, and she followed instinctively. The tunnels shifted slightly, almost reacting to their presence, but the core's light carved a protective path through the distortions. Minutes stretched like hours as they navigated the labyrinthine passages. Then, faint mechanical sounds reached their ears, the soft clank of gears, the hiss of hydraulic servos. Angela froze. "She's close," she whispered. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. Massive conduits of black crystal stretched across the room, pulsing with energy siphoned from the shattered moons above. Natasha stood at the center, her crimson eyes gleaming like twin suns of malice. Around her the constructs hummed, synchronized. To her every thought, Angela raised the core defensively. "Natasha, it ends here." Natasha's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Ends? No, Angela. This is where it truly begins. You've walked right into my domain. Welcome to the heart of the shadow." With a flick of her hand, the constructs surged forward. Angela countered, immediately projecting waves of light from the core that disintegrated the nearest machines. Sparks flew, and shards of black crystal exploded into dust. But for every construct destroyed, two more advanced from the shadows, each more resilient than the last. Kale moved alongside her, covering her flanks, his rifle emitting precise bursts of plasma that slowed the advancing wave. "Angela, the core can't hold them all. We need another plan." Angela's eyes narrowed. She focused on the central conduits, sensing the flow of energy feeding Natasha's forces. The core pulsed, and a surge of blue light radiated outward, reaching into the conduits themselves. The black energy within the chamber shuddered, momentarily faltering as if resisting her intrusion. Natasha's scream of frustration echoed through the chamber. "You cannot touch the source. This power is mine." Angela pressed forward, her voice ringing with clarity and command. "No, the core protects Eryndor, and I am its bearer." With a surge of will, the core expanded its resonance, channeling light through the conduits, severing the energy supply to Natasha's constructs. One by one they collapsed, inert, until only the shadow herself remained, her crimson gaze blazing. With fury, Kale exhaled, sweat dripping down his brow. "We did it, at least partially." Angela's chest heaved, the core pulsing in harmony with her heartbeat. "This is only the beginning. She'll adapt. She'll rebuild. But now, we know her strength and her lair, and that gives us an edge." The fractured moons glimmered faintly through cracks in the chamber ceiling, casting jagged reflections across the scene. The Shadow's lair, once a place of absolute control, had been disrupted. A small victory, but a meaningful one. Angela turned to Kale. "We move carefully, gather data, prepare traps. She'll strike back stronger and smarter. But next time, we'll be ready to confront her fully." Kale nodded. "Lead the way, Angela. Whatever comes, we face it together." Angela and Kale had withdrawn from the shattered lair, retreating to a hidden vantage point among the jagged spires of the fractured moons. The core hovered beside Angela, pulsing rhythmically, its energy a quiet reminder of their fragile victory. Though the constructs had been neutralized, the shadow herself had vanished, leaving behind only the echo of her fury and the faint residue of black energy that lingered in the tunnels. Kale adjusted his visor, scanning the moonscape. "I can't shake the feeling that she's watching us," he muttered. "It's like she knows every move we make." Angela nodded. The Guardian's words had been clear. The shadow thrives on misdirection and fear. Trust the core, trust each other. But trust alone could not prepare her for what was coming. She reached out mentally, letting the core probe the residual energy, following the faint traces of Natasha's presence. What she found chilled her blood. Hidden within the tendrils of black energy were fragments of deception, subtle signals, planted illusions meant to mislead, to fracture their perceptions. Natasha had anticipated their incursion. Angela could feel the shadow's cunning, every maneuver a calculated attempt to test their limits. Kale noticed the shift in Angela's expression. "What is it?" he asked, tense. Angela's voice was low, measured. "She's planning something. The constructs were only a distraction. She's preparing for a larger strike, one that will exploit any hesitation. And worse, she's trying to turn our allies against us." Kale's brow furrowed. "Turn allies against us? How? Angela's mind raced. The shadow had agents scattered across Eryndor, disguised as neutral observers, embedded within factions they had previously believed were trustworthy. The subtle manipulations, the whispers of doubt, all orchestrated to fracture their unity. If Natasha succeeded even partially, the war could tilt in her favor before the next engagement. The core pulsed urgently, as if warning Angela to act. "We need information," she said aloud, her tone sharp. "We need to identify her agents before she strikes, and we need to be ready for the attack she's planning. If we wait, we lose. Not just the moons, but everything on Eryndor." Cale clenched his fists, frustration and determination blending in his gaze. "Then we start with the tunnels. If she's left any trace after our last assault, we follow it. No mistakes this time." Angela focused on the core, extending her consciousness through the energy lattice they had created in the lair. Flashes of memory and intent filtered through. Faint visions of mechanized constructs being rebuilt, shadowy figures moving in secret corridors, and Natasha herself smiling with that cruel satisfaction that chilled Angela's core. "This isn't just war," Angela murmured. "It's a game of shadows, deception, and perception. Every step we take, she's already thinking 5 moves ahead. But we can use that against her." Kyle looked at her, a mix of awe and anxiety in his eyes. "How? We barely survived the last encounter." Angela's gaze hardened. "We use her overconfidence. We anticipate her misdirection, and we turn it back on her. The core is more than a weapon, it's a lens. It lets us see the patterns she's trying to hide. And if we act strategically, we can trap her before she realizes we know the truth." The moons above trembled faintly, as if echoing the tension in the air. Angela and Cale moved deeper into the fractured terrain, tracing the subtle imprints left by Natasha's manipulations. Shadows stretched unnaturally, wind whistled through jagged crystal spires, and distant rumblings hinted at activity far below. Angela's hand brushed the core, feeling its pulse quicken in resonance with her determination. "We may not know all her plans yet," she said, "but we'll be ready. And when she strikes next, we'll be the ones shaping the battlefield." Cale nodded, gripping his weapon tightly. "Together," he said. Angela smiled faintly, a flicker of resolve lighting her eyes. "Together." The fractured moons loomed above, casting jagged patterns across the terrain. Somewhere in the shadows, Natasha prepared her next move, unaware that Angela's bond with the core had grown beyond mere defense. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of Eryndor, and nothing would ever be the same again. The fractured moons cast a ghostly glow across the jagged terrain as Angela and Cale moved cautiously through the labyrinthine tunnels. The air was thick with tension, every echo a possible warning, every shadow a potential threat. The core hovered near Angela, its blue light pulsing in sync with her heartbeat, guiding them along paths that seemed unstable yet vital. Cale whispered, his voice barely audible over the distant rumble of energy. "I don't like this. It feels too quiet." Angela's gaze sharpened. She felt it, too, a subtle distortion in the energy around them, like the core itself was recoiling slightly. "It's not quiet. It's deliberate," she murmured. "Natasha is setting something. We're walking right into her design." The tunnels opened into a massive chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. Black crystalline spires stretched upward like jagged fingers, pulsing faintly with residual energy from the shattered moons. At the center, Natasha awaited, flanked by newly reconstructed constructs, their sleek black forms bristling with weaponry far beyond the ones they had faced before. "Welcome, Angela," Natasha's voice echoed, smooth and venomous. "I hoped you would come." Curiosity? Or arrogance? Perhaps a bit of both. Angela raised the core defensively. "It's neither curiosity nor arrogance. I'm here to end this. You cannot control the core." Natasha laughed, a sound that reverberated through the chamber, mingling with the hum of her constructs. "Control? No. but influence. That I can do." She gestured, and the spires around the chamber pulsed, sending waves of distortion through the air. The core flickered under the pressure, and Angela felt her control waver. Kyle's hands tightened around his rifle. "Angela, the core! It's struggling." Angela gritted her teeth, focusing inward. The core's light pulsed erratically, mirroring her own tension. She realized the spires themselves were siphoning energy, feeding Natasha, and weakening the core. "We need to destroy the spires," Angela said urgently. "That's the source of her amplification." The shadow moved with lightning speed, a blur against the darkness. She unleashed a torrent of black energy that collided with the core's protective aura, forcing Angela back. Sparks of light and shadow danced violently across the chamber, illuminating jagged reflections on the crystalline walls. Cal fired, taking out two of the constructs advancing from the flank. "I'll cover you. Take out the spires." Angela surged forward, the core extending tendrils of light that lashed out, striking the nearest spires. They cracked, but for each destroyed, two more pulsed with energy, as if responding to Natasha's will. The shadow's laughter echoed, growing louder, almost triumphant. "You think destroying these can stop me?" Natasha taunted. "Every path you take, every move you make, it only brings you closer to the inevitable." Angela gritted her teeth, drawing on the core's resonance. She could feel the pattern now, the subtle way the spires fed off the shadows, amplifying Natasha's strength. Closing her eyes, she extended her mind into the core, connecting with the energy lattice. She visualized the flow, tracing it, bending it, and in a surge of clarity, she struck. Light erupted from the core, flowing through the chamber in a network of pulsing energy. The spires shattered, one by one, releasing bursts of blinding radiance that forced Natasha back. The constructs faltered, their movements jerky as their power source collapsed. Natasha's crimson eyes narrowed, her body coiling with tension. "Clever, but not enough," she hissed, hurling a concentrated strike of shadow energy directly at Angela. Angela met it head-on, the core flaring violently as the opposing forces collided. The shockwave threw her backward, sliding across the crystalline floor. Kyle lunged to steady her, but Angela's focus never wavered. The core pulsed, responding to her determination, and with a concentrated surge, she reflected Natasha's strike, sending it ricocheting into the remaining constructs, disintegrating them in waves of light. Natasha staggered, her composure cracking for the first time. "Impossible," she whispered, retreating toward the shadows. "This isn't over, Angela. The game has only just begun." The shadow vanished into the darkness, leaving behind the silence of a chamber littered with shattered spires and smoking constructs. Angela exhaled, chest heaving, the core hovering steadily once more. Kyle looked at her, awe and exhaustion mingling in his expression. That was insane. Are you okay?" Angela nodded, though her body trembled with exertion. "We're not safe yet. Natasha will regroup, adapt, and strike again, but now we know we can challenge her directly." Above them, the fractured moons glimmered, fractured shards of light reflecting across the chamber. The fractured moons hung low over the horizon, casting jagged streaks of silver and blue across the barren landscape. Angela and Kale advanced cautiously, the core hovering beside her, pulsing with a rhythm that mirrored her own heartbeat. Each step took them closer to Natasha, whose presence seemed to seep into the very stones beneath their feet. The shadow had left clues, intentional traces designed to lure them into a final confrontation. And Angela intended to meet it head-on. Kale's voice was tense, barely above a whisper. "This is it. We go in, and there's no turning back. Are you ready for whatever she's prepared?" Angela's eyes glimmered with steely resolve. "We've come too far to retreat now. The core and I are ready. Let's end this, Kale." Together, they entered a cavernous chamber, the ceiling lost in darkness. Crystalline spires jutted from the floor, each resonating with faint echoes of Natasha's lingering energy. At the center, Natasha awaited, her crimson eyes alight with anticipation and malice. She was poised, coiled like a predator, every movement deliberate. Behind her, a massive construct pulsed with dark energy, a towering amalgamation of shadow and technology, its limbs bristling with weaponry. "Angela," Natasha's voice slithered through the chamber, smooth and venomous. "You've followed me well, but this is where your journey ends." Angela raised the core defensively. Light rippled along its surface, extending like protective tendrils around her. "Your journey ends, Natasha. I won't let you destroy Eryndor." With a swift motion, Natasha unleashed a wave of shadow energy, striking the floor with such force that crystalline shards erupted like missiles. Angela propelled herself forward, with the core's resonance, deflecting the shards in a brilliant display of light. Sparks flew, illuminating Natasha's face, twisted with anger, yet fascinated by the challenge. Kale fired at the towering construct, aiming for the joints and circuits where the energy seemed weakest. Each shot produced sparks, slowing the creature, but not stopping it. "Angela, you need to focus on her," he shouted over the cacophony. Angela nodded, channeling the core's energy. Feeling its pulse synchronize with her thoughts, she extended a radiant beam toward Natasha, forcing her to dodge. The shadow countered with a strike of pure black energy, and the chamber shook violently, shards of crystal tumbling like meteor showers. The two forces clashed, light and shadow, twisting and tearing at each other, creating patterns of raw energy that distorted the air. Angela realized the core's resonance could do more than repel. It could reflect and redirect. She focused, bending the flow of light into a spiral that funneled Natasha's attack back toward her constructs. One by one, the towering machines collapsed in arcs of smoke and molten metal. Natasha roared in frustration, the sound echoing across the chamber. She hurled herself forward, launching a concentrated strike at Angela herself. The core flared violently, absorbing the impact and sending shockwaves through the cavern. Angela stumbled but maintained her footing, drawing deeper on the core's power than ever before. "You underestimated me," Angela said, her voice steady, despite exhaustion. "I've learned from every step you've forced me to take. Every shadow you've cast, I've turned into light," Natasha faltered, her crimson eyes narrowing. "Impossible," she whispered, staggering slightly as the core's energy wrapped around her, illuminating every corner of the chamber. Angela's light revealed the weaknesses in Natasha's armor, the fractures in her energy field. With a final concentrated surge, Angela projected a beam that shattered the shadow's constructs completely, disintegrating the massive machine in a cascade of sparks and molten shards. Natasha screamed, thrown backward by the sheer force. She attempted one last strike, but the core's resonance met her attack, neutralizing it entirely. Angela stepped forward, the core's light bathing the chamber. "It's over, Natasha. Yield, or Eryndor will rise without you." Natasha weakened and, cornered, fell to her knees, the malice in her eyes giving way to reluctant acknowledgement. "This isn't the end," she hissed, though the fire in her voice had dimmed. "The shadows will return." Angela lowered the core slightly, her gaze unwavering. "And we'll be ready. Every time," Kyle exhaled, relief flooding him, as he moved to Angela's side. "You did it. We actually did it." Angela looked around at the shattered chamber, the remnants of the battle reflecting in the crystalline walls. The war was far from over. The shadow's influence still lingered across Eryndor, but for the first time, hope had a tangible form. The fractured moons above seemed to shine brighter, as if acknowledging the light that had finally pushed back the darkness. Angela and Kale stood together, ready for whatever trials awaited, knowing that the core's bond and their unity could withstand any shadow. The fractured moons of Eryndor cast a kaleidoscope of silver, blue, and violet across the devastated landscape. Shattered spires glimmered faintly in the afterglow of the core's energy, remnants of the epic battle that had shaken the very foundations of the planet. Angela stood at the center of the open plains, the core hovering beside her like a living extension of her will. Cale was by her side, his eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of Natasha's return, though he knew deep down the shadow had been defeated, at least for now. Angela's chest heaved with exhaustion, yet her posture remained unwavering. The core pulsed rhythmically, its light resonating with the fractured moons above. Every beat felt like a heartbeat of Eryndor itself, a testament to the fragile hope that now flourished in the shadow of destruction. Cale exhaled slowly. "It's finally over. I can't believe we made it through all that." Angela shook, her head slightly, a wry smile touching her lips. "It's never truly over, Kyle. Darkness always finds a way. But today, we've proven that light can push back, that unity and strategy can overcome even the deepest shadows." In the distance, the remnants of Natasha's lair smoldered, blackened crystal shards scattered across the plains. The shadow had vanished into the void, her power dissipating like mist, leaving only traces of the malice she had wrought. Angela felt a shiver of lingering caution. Natasha was clever, resilient, and patient, but she also knew the core had grown with her, strengthening alongside every challenge, every confrontation. Angela raised her hand, extending her consciousness into the core. Streams of light wove around the shattered moons, sweeping through the valleys and tunnels, restoring the natural energy flows that Natasha had twisted and corrupted. Small crystal outposts, once tainted with darkness, now pulsed with gentle radiance, a sign that balance was slowly returning. Kyle watched her, awestruck. How are you doing that?" Angela turned, her eyes glowing softly with the core's reflection. The core isn't just a weapon, it's a living bond. It senses imbalance, corruption, and fear. It responds to intention, to purpose. Right now, it's restoring what was broken. But this is only the beginning. Eryndor's recovery will take time, vigilance, and care. They walked toward the edge of the shattered plains, the moon's fractured reflections dancing across the crystalline terrain. The silence was profound, yet not empty. It hummed with potential, a fragile harmony that whispered of a world rising from chaos. Kyle stopped and looked at Angela, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "You carried this through, Angela. Every battle, every challenge. The core chose the right person." Angela smiled faintly, but her gaze remained on the moons. "It wasn't just me. It was you, too. And the choices we made together. Power alone isn't enough. Strategy, trust, and resilience, that's what defeated the shadow." From the horizon, a faint shimmer appeared. A distant wisp of energy, like a whisper of Natasha's essence. Angela's heart tightened, though she did not waver. She turned to Cale. "She may return someday, but we will be ready. Always," Cale nodded, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Together." Angela allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. For years she had faced uncertainty, darkness, and doubt. But the core had shown her the strength that comes from unity and clarity. And she had learned to wield it with precision. The fractured moons above seemed to respond, pulsing brighter, casting a warm light across the devastated plains. As the two of them stood there, the wind carrying faint echoes of distant, unseen currents. Angela felt the weight of the journey lift slightly. They had survived impossible odds, faced a cunning and relentless foe, and emerged stronger. The shadow had been defeated, her schemes dismantled, her constructs destroyed, and her power curtailed. Yet Eryndor was not fully healed. The moons were fractured, the energy flows disrupted, and remnants of darkness lingered. Angela knew that vigilance would always be necessary. But in this moment she allowed herself hope, the pure, unwavering kind that shone brighter than any shadow. She looked at Kale and then at the core, pulsing steadily beside her. "The moons are shattered," she said softly, "but the light remains, and as long as we stand together, no shadow can consume it." Above them, the fractured moons glittered like fractured jewels in the sky, reflecting the promise of a world rebuilt and the enduring light of those who dared to stand against the darkness.